which means that God created dopamine so that we do drugs. How did that happen? यार कहीं जाना ही नहीं है, try कर लो यार, just try. And the whole concept of multiverse basically came from the life of a student. Think about it. 70% of what you are is not what you decided for yourself. The basic issue is a drug is any substance which can affect your brain in a stimulating or a depressing way. I have lately started thinking that the world has gone bipolar. Think about it. Am I audible everywhere? I hope I am understandable as well, because both of them have very different meanings. People are pretty much audible to each other. We can listen to them. But do we understand them? That's a very dark matter to understand. Young man, what happened there? Your leg?
Yeah, ligament.
How did that happen?
While playing football.
People must be asking you how's your health and how's your leg recovering, right? The problem with mental illness is exactly opposite. You cannot see what is happening inside your brain. Nobody asks what actually happened to you. Wounds, if physical, are visible. And you know, किसी ने कहावत बोल दी थी, जो भी दिखता है वही बिकता है. Then that day was the day that mental illness did not find any space anywhere in vocabulary of people. Even today, none of the insurance companies would pass the claim for a patient suffering from depression. A suffering which is way more worse than at times even cancer pain. Because you're caged inside your brains, your own parameters, your own world, and then when you talk to people, यार मन नहीं लग रहा, अब मूवी देख के आ जाओ, यार मूड नहीं है, फ्रेंड से मिल लो, यार कहीं जाना ही नहीं है, ये ट्राई कर लो यार, just try, you just need efforts, right? Of course, these were the three lessons nobody ever taught me. That is why I, as a fool, decided to discuss my personal mental health with you. The bigger fool is not you, but me. But nobody would ever say that emotion, please hold on to that, because I don't understand that. I need to understand what exact thing that you are suffering from, because I cannot see that. But the world is suffering from even worse problems right now. Did you see that? The world is suffering from a crisis lately. We meet in an era where Russia and Ukraine are fighting and waging a bad war. People are dying everywhere. Sri Lanka has gone bankrupt. People don't have money to eat. Roshan Mahanama, a very famous cricketer, was seen on the streets distributing tea to everyone, saying, whatever earning I have left with me should go to my country for whom I played cricket and earned a lot from them. The world markets are crashing and we are looking at a global financial depression. Sadhguru says that the soil is eroding. By 2035, Chicago and Illinois, first world places, are going to suffer from famines. Problems of the world. Problems of youth world. Yeah, will they roll over my data if I do not use it up tonight? Will I be given an extension of my mobile phone plan so that I can finish off my OTT platform streaming tonight? Will he or she pick up my call or answer my DM? What if I'm rejected? Will my parents, goddamn, ever understand me? Now I'm not trying to degrade the former or the later, but the earlier ones are problems of the world. We think a lot about problems of the world, but we worry about the problems of our world because they affect all of our mental health. Today, I have 4 points to talk about. Youngsters or teenagers, drugs and addiction, mental health and psychiatrists, and the famous word dopamine. That's been trending pretty high lately on all social media platforms. I simply feel that every student lives in a multiverse, and the whole concept of multiverse basically came from the life of a student. Think about it. You all are living in parallel universes where people know you as completely different people. A universe in which your parents feels, oh, my Raja beta, my Shona beti, kitni seedhi. There must be nothing wrong with her. The world comes up and harasses him or her. They are never responsible for any wrongdoings. Why would people harass them? Why can't they leave them alone? In a very parallel universe at the very same time. This student in the college would be a pain in the neck for most of the students, and the teacher would be like, oh, they are hardly in the classrooms. They are hardly listening to us. All the time they want to do what they want to do. In a very third parallel universe, their own relationships, their girlfriends or boyfriends would be like, oh, so caring. He's the blue tick of my WhatsApp. Every time I do something, he simply blue ticks without even understanding what I'm saying. And in a very fourth universe, उसी का friend कमीना है, सबको उल्लू बनाता है, रात को मेरे साथ बैठ के पीता है. You know, it's a multiverse of madness in the truest sense, and that is not a myth. All of us, let's face it, including me, has stayed in this sort of a mentality at some point of time. I don't think either it is good or bad. It is something like a fast food. You cannot simply consume it for the sake of it. Consuming it may not be bad, but consuming only it, difficult, because obesity is also a problem that the world faces. When I talk about young brains, all of you, I'm very sure most of you below the age of 25 right now, a very crucial and critical age, because all of us are born with a brain which has 50 to 100 billion number of neurons, all of us. And I'm not sure why someone is more intelligent than me, smarter than me, or more knowledgeable than me, because it all depends upon the connections between those neurons, which range up to 1000 billion, which I in my language would call as neuroplasticity. The identity that all of you have right now, just think about it. Who are you? Who are you? You have a name and a surname, a religion that you follow because your parents follow that, an ideology, a cultural belief system just because you're born into it, a preference for food, preference for meeting people, making friends, because that is how you're born and brought up in your family. 70% of what you are is not what you decided for yourself. Your identity is not what you actually want to be. You're all born with it. What you're doing right now here in Micah, when he said that, why are you all here? Forget about why you're all here in this session. You are in Micah so that you can form something out of that identity. What if the I in the Micah stands for the identity that you're looking for? What if some of you can really manage to develop that? Many of you might fail, but again, failure is a very complex topic I really dare not to talk about. None of us are trained how to deal with failure, rejection, or any sort of anxieties. That is altogether a different topic to talk. So as you are born, the same number of cells, all of you. The funny part of nature, what game did they play with you? They decided that let's do something different. What if every youngster is born with the same number of resources? And here, I would like you to introduce Dev. Dev, a patient who has been very close to me since many years now. He was 16 when he cracked a famous marathon for coding by a very big tech company of America, and instantly he got a reward from them that you are summoned to America to do a 6 months of fellowship, which will be followed by a scholarship and education into the topmost institute of America from the company. Thereon the packages will be discussed with you. Dev was very excited because he was a school dropout. All Dev thought was coding was his passion, and that is something that really activates his brain. He was hyperactive all the time. He had new ideas. He used to start something new, he would leave it halfway because that would not at all give him any sort of novelties. He wants something new again. Time went on. Dev ultimately went to America. Dev had a problem. He used to take decisions and not think at all. He would go for insecurity over surety. He would go for risk over any sort of comfort or complacency. Dev was not different. Dev was pretty much the youngster or a teenager that each one of us had been at some point of time in our lives. Because as a teenager, the areas of the brain which bring you pleasure, reward, gratification, thrill seeking, novelty, they develop way before the areas that would bring you decision making, problem solving, rational thinking, cognitive functioning. That is funny. It simply means that we are born as thrill seekers. We are all born as novelty seekers. We all want something new happening all the time. That is a normal teenage brain. And then people say that teenagers won't get things. They of course don't get things because they all they want is gratification, pleasure, reward and enjoyment. By the time the decision making areas develop, all of us have taken all the major decisions of our life, which means we have already decided what college we are going to. We have already decided, most of us, many of us, what relationships we are falling into. We have decided our career, ambition, goal and future. We have decided almost everything at a point when the decision-making centers of the brain are still not connected with the mainstream brain, the prefrontal cortex. I was having a discussion with Mr. Mishra the moment I came in. Before that, the prefrontal cortex is the only organ because of which all of us are surviving today. Because the Neanderthal man, out of which we ultimately developed into Homo sapiens sapien, was the strongest of the contender to evolve into a living being but they did not have a prefrontal cortex as developed as we have. And so, evolution decided that let the Homo sapiens sapiens be alive and evolve into humans and not the strongest of the people, which means this is the strongest area that all of you have: creative ideas, positive thinking, negative thoughts, ruminations, worries. All of it arises out of such a small organ, the prefrontal cortex. When they say your brain is the size of a fist, it's not. Your prefrontal cortex is basically the size of a fist. This small an area decides the future of the world. Butterfly effect, we have heard so much, the chaos theory, we know so much about it, read so much about it. The basic issue is, a drug is any substance which can affect your brain in a stimulating or a depressing way. So there are psychoactive substances and there are brain depressant, there are neurodepressing substances. There are substances which are made from natural origin, which is plant products, the very famous ganja, weed, cannabis products. Even cocaine is supposed to be a plant product. It grows from the fruit called coca. And then there are the synthetic products, mephedrone, meth, heroin, very, very rampant lately in our city itself. The thing is, this drug is gonna enter your body through any system. You puff, you snort, you chew, you swallow them. It enters your bloodstream, it reaches your brain and it affects a chemical called dopamine. Interesting. Which means that God created dopamine so that we do drugs, correct? They already have a hook inside, which is waiting all the time. जैसे drug आती है, टूट पड़ते हैं, मौज करते हैं, party करते हैं. That drug ultimately enters a system of your brain, which scientifically nowadays is recognized as the reward pathway of the brain. The reward pathway is exactly the region of your brain which is activated when you achieve something. Now think of this situation. All of you will be preparing for an exam for semester or the end of the year, giving an exam and ultimately getting a result which would give you a reward for probably whatever hard work you have done throughout the semester. You wait 6 months for a simple reward. What the hell is this like? There are easier and faster rewards available out there, which in seconds or minutes would give you stimulation and pleasure, which is equivalent to like salvation. And then why would we wait for 6 months? Because at the end of 6 months, if the paper is not set rightly, if the submissions are not finished, and in the worst case scenario, some of you fall sick because we are still into an era of pandemic. You may not be able to give the exams. So why do that? The better option is, why not get instant gratification? Because that drug, as soon as it enters the body, hijacks the reward pathway of your brain. So the new system of the brain is very simple. You don't get a reward or pleasure in absence of the drug. The simplest of the pleasure would only be attained in the presence of this drug. So what happens is, a substance is not always addictive. A brain may always not be pathological. It is the interplay between these two systems which arises into a complicated situation, because we also live in an era. I have lately started thinking that the world has gone bipolar. Think about it. At one end, we have people who are talking about the drug problem of Punjab and Northeast. There are people who are saying that the generation is going, mitti mein mil jayegi, kuch bhi nahi rehne wala hai. They are talking about criminalizing everything, even ban alcohol, nicotine, cigarettes, everything. That is one pole. And the second pole says, why not we talk about decriminalization of cannabis? Why can't we talk about decriminalizing possession of less than 5 grams of any substance in hands of a youngster who is caught for the first time in the hands of a legal system? Why don't we talk about medicinal benefits of these drugs? Because ultimately, all of us are depressed at some point of time. All of us feel sad. But there is a difference. Sadness is an emotion, depression is an illness. The drug that you take may not be a treatment for the problem that you have. That is altogether a different talk which we can have in future. But the drug ultimately hijacks your brain in a way that you are not able to survive without it. There are physiological, there are psychological dependence that it develops. Dopamine. A hook which God gave you so that you ultimately are united with the match made in heaven of a drug. Wrong. Dopamine is basically responsible for 3 main functions. Dopamine has a function of giving you simple sanity and pleasure. People who are sitting here without their heads on their phone, because I can count 11 of the people whose dopamine is falling short in front of the talk I am having. So they are having their dose of dopamine from their screens, which is fine. I don't mind that. But then double stimulation is also something difficult. I'm not sure how many of you can handle 2 relationships at a time. One you people share with me right now. The second with the phone instantly is a difficult one. But then it's your choice. What happens is, Dopamine is responsible for motivation, drive and purpose. You people reached here because there was an active dopamine system in your brain. Dopamine is responsible for simple movements. An absence of dopamine would cause a neurological disorder called Parkinson's disease. Dopamine was not given as a hook so that all of us can ultimately unite it with its eternal partner called a drug. Now what happens if all four of these systems come together? Think about it. A teenager, a youngster, a student of a college who has a disturbed developed system of the brain seeking thrill and novelty, cannot take rational decisions for themselves, suddenly comes in touch with a drug that gives instant stimulation and gratification, that solves many of their problems for a temporary period, that gives a sort of adrenaline rush. Dev. The character became more interesting when suddenly he became a very popular gamer. Dev started doing meth, crystal, snow, ice. He used to snort it. He was 18 when he first used this drug. And there was a sudden change in his performance, in his creativity, in his capacity to handle everything around him. He was a sensation on internet. And everybody were following Dev the streamer, Dev the drifter. Dev the coder was a thing of the past. Dev suddenly started feeling that I should have done this way more earlier. Why did I waste all my life not doing all these things? I would have been so much focused in my life. But one day he was sitting on this stream online, he's playing a game and suddenly his brain switches off. He's like tired, he cannot think. That was exactly the day he did not snort meth. And he realizes that okay, in absence of meth, my brain is different. The enthusiasm, zeal, motivation, it's not the same. My energy is not the same. I do get tired because they with meth used to crash, which means 48 hours on the trot he was streaming, then he would crash for a day. He would not get up at all because that fatigue, mental and physical of 48 hours would take a toll. He would crash, he would get up, snort meth and start immediately streaming his games. Gradually, they've developed a common disorder of people who consume excessive amount of meth, which is substance-induced psychosis. They've started hearing some voices in his ears which will constantly telling him that you are not good enough. I think you should die. Everybody is ultimately gonna kill you. He had delusions in which he constantly felt that people were keeping some sort of watch on him. Everybody was after him. People were listening to him, planning against him, were trying to destroy his life in some or the other way. He started developing behavior disturbances. Dev, last time when found in his house, did not take a bath for 15 days, did not eat. There was a weight loss of 7 kg in 15 days. He was caught up with lots of fungal infection, taken to a facility in America which is very famous for de-addiction. He stayed there for 6 months. People there said that it is going to be a long journey back. They was diagnosed with primary ADHD, attention deficit hyperactive disorder. ADHD? I think that the word disorder should be removed from ADHD because it should not be termed as a disorder. The point is, if a teenager at this age comes in contact with a drug so early, the neuromodulation and neuroplasticity changes forever. Consider it like growing something like a seed in a soil. Whatever you provide as nutrition or don't provide, the seed will grow. That is exactly what your neuroplasticity is. When the neurons are getting connections among each other, if you provide the right amount of nutrition, which would be emotional bonding, which would be information, which would be facts, and never be opinions, never be validation, then the process of neuroplasticity can really be positive. A drug comes in and now it takes over the process of neuroplasticity as well. Now the young brain develops in a very awkward way and gradually we get a brain which is really good in front of the drug. But drug stimulates the brain, depresses the brain in a very specific way. And this could ultimately lead to a, let's say, a wrong wire connected in a wrong extension board. What do you get? A short circuit. That is what happens with a brain which is high on drugs all the time. Think about it. What's your choice? Would any one of you like to stand up, ask a question about addiction, drugs, awareness, mental health, depression, anxiety? Or would you want to sink once again in your smartphones and do what you are doing till now while the talk was ongoing?